Good evening, everybody. This is Jose Solorio, Chair of the Public Safety Code Enforcement and Neighborhood Empowerment Committee. I am calling this meeting to order. We have a good number of issues and should be a good meeting. We do have a number of public comment items as well. Most seem to be related to item number 2 and some general comments. So for the record, let me just call to see who of my colleagues are here in attendance. I'm obviously here, Jose Solorio, Councilmember Villegas.
Present.
Thank you. And we are still waiting on the Councilmember Tinajero, but given the time and the individuals here already, we will begin. On item number 1 is approval of the minutes. They generally are fine with me, but on the top of page 3, the second paragraph has a note that I would like to discuss at an upcoming meeting the possibility of implementing a new shift schedule. I don't believe that's what I said, and really it should be rephrased along the lines of that any ideas regarding shift schedules should be considered by the new acting police chief, as would be appropriate. So not anything that I want to bring back to this committee, at least not yet, or anything that I am pushing for. So that's we'll let the police department handle that. Any other comments or suggestions regarding the minutes? If not, I'll move that we approve the minutes with that change. Second by Councilmember Villegas. That item is approved. Next, we have an update on the dwelling unit ordinance being considered by city staff, and then to the city council. We have a presentation by Candida Neal. I do know that there's going to be additional opportunities for the public on this, as well as we've heard a presentation on this previously, so not sure how long this presentation is, but if we can proceed accordingly. And you know what, let's, before we do that, actually go back to public comments. We have 2 items that are just for general public purposes. We have Jose Arrea and Connie Hamilton. If you could please come up. We do have a mic. If you could come up, because I do believe we record these meetings, so please speak into the microphone.
So good afternoon. My name is Jose Arrea. I'm with the Madison Park Neighborhood Association. And I just wanted to address something that is not on the agenda. And I have some letters that were written by the Santa Ana Healthy Neighborhood Alliance in regards to the proposed security cameras at Madison Park and 6 other parks. You know, the Madison Park Neighborhood Association has tried for the last 15 years to reclaim its park for the families and the children in the community, and we haven't been successful in doing that. We had made some strides in terms of new lighting on the community garden, but still, the park belongs to the delinquents and the undesirables in the community. So we want our park back. When I moved into the neighborhood, we had 2 children. They're now 15 and 17 years old. They have never gone to Madison Park to play. And while we know that there's a need for additional parks, I think what we need to have first is safe parks, and then look into additional parks. So I have some letters for you from for the Alliance and supporting the security cameras in those parks. And we hope that on September 19th, you will support with your vote, the establishments of those cameras. The other thing that it is on the agenda, but I just wanted to mention, is that Mariscos Hector repeatedly had approached the neighborhood and in the area to work with them on their efforts to expand their localities, but also to upgrade the liquor licenses. And it's been, again and again, several neighborhood associations, the mothers from Kennedy Elementary, the mothers from Madison Elementary, who are being very vocal in the kind of activities that go on in these locales, and including the recent police chase of this man with guns and cash and an 8-year-old in that accident that resulted in there, and also several fights that ended up even with someone got stabbed at Madison and Howard coming out from one of those Marisco Hector locales about 2 years ago. I don't have the dates, but I just want to express our opposition on the upgrade of the alcoholic licenses, but also on the expansion of their locales. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Connie
Give you these
Hamilton.
letters now.
Yes, just hand them here to our staff. I'm not really going to hold anybody to 2 or 3 minutes, but let's try to be succinct because we have a number of items and a number of speakers on other items, but speak freely.
Well,
Connie Hamilton.
I'll try, but I have 5 different things I want to touch on, but
Sure,
I will
sure.
make it brief. First of all, I know that you have rolled out the police cameras, and there were a lot of workshops initially talking to the public about how they should be used, and I'm wondering if the public will get an update. May I suggest maybe at Comlink that they can give an update? So, for example, they asked, should the cameras be rolling all the time or just during interactions? And
Good suggestions. We have a couple folks here from our police department, so they will.
okay,
follow up
good. Yeah, I think Comlink might be a good venue. That way people can ask
That's a good
questions.
suggestion. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, number 2, the customer service survey that I don't even think you were here, Jose, at the time. But they were going to implement a customer satisfaction survey for calls for service, and it just disappeared off the radar. I don't know what happened. Can you guys check on that and see if it can be or what?
Yeah, maybe
Do a refresh?
maybe through our city manager or police chief, we could get an update. We know that the research organization has been a little slow in getting to that project, and maybe at some point we just need to shift it to somebody else to do that project because it's been delayed about a year. Is my rough estimation.
Yeah, it has.
Very good. That's item number 2.
Yeah,
we know you have 3 more
communicate
other
with
items.
us about that.
We'll do.
Number 3, fireworks. I sent all the council representatives the thoughts from the neighbors, and they really want some action. And then I heard there's going to be action. And what are you guys going to do anything for next year to curb it? Because the fireworks were totally out of control. And I hope everyone hasn't forgotten that because somebody was supposed to get on that. I think Vince Sarmiento had communicated with a resident that said he was on it. So I don't know. Any news on that?
No update on that. I know
Okay.
we've had some conversations here, and some of these items are on the agenda, so we can't have lengthy responses to your comments.
Exactly,
but
right.
That will be coming back to this committee or the council as a whole.
Okay, and I'll follow up
well
by
before the
email,
next
too.
holiday. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Number 4, California Lodge Suites. Thank you for implementing some action there. And I'm wondering if eventually if we can get an update on what's going on with you guys trying to curtail some of the criminal activity there. So I know you probably can't respond right now, but I just want to let you know we're very interested in updates on that.
No, very, very good. Mhm.
Okay, number 5, we have FRS radios for the neighborhood. Orange County Fire Authority. We weren't working with Captain Black. We were working with Steve Horner. And he was transferred to the airport, John Wayne Airport. And he was very active in trying to get something going for the neighborhoods to communicate an emergency situation with FRS radios, communicating with ham operators and then the police station too, because as you know, during an earthquake, all of the phone lines are going to go down and people are going to be in trouble. So we really need to implement an FRS radio plan. Costa Mesa has already done that. I don't know if you know Brenda Emmerich and Diane Hall. They're very together, very organized. We really need to think about that. Because in an emergency situation, the neighbors are just going to be left high and dry. They won't have any way to communicate. So we really need to think about that. But I'll follow up by email on all this stuff. But we definitely want to get updates on some of these things.
We do have a fire department rep here, so maybe he can provide a little update to the council, and we could share that with Ms. Hamilton.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, especially in light of all the catastrophes around the country. We want to make sure that during emergencies we have the best ways of communicating. We do have other public comments, but they relate to other items, and I think for my use and staff's, we'll have those comments after the items get presented. So we already approved the minutes, so next we are going to go back to the dwelling unit ordinance. I know there's been some public feedback about having additional outreach and discussions, and I do know that there are some of those activities planned, but I think too there is a need in trying to implement something sooner than later, because we really have been seeing an increase in the number of these units, and we want to make sure that if and when they do come in, that they're in the best place possible, and to reduce impacts on neighborhoods. So if staff is going in the right direction, I would prefer that we not slow this process down too much. But we do have a presentation by Candida Neal to let us know where this is at and suggestions on what the ordinance would include.
This is a quick update. But I would like to give you some background. As we all know, the state adopted the ordinance in the fall of last year and made it effective January 2017, January 1st, 2017. And that law took away from local communities some of their authority to regulate accessory dwelling units. And our ordinance, as a result of that, the one that we had in effect for more than 13 years and had served us quite well, became null and void. In anticipation of that January 1st deadline, we scheduled some public feedback, and we had come out with what we thought was the appropriate response, which was our city really recognizes that there is an affordable housing crisis, and we wanted to do something about it. So within the confines of the state law, we did draft a law. We went out to the public with it, and we found out as staff that we were wrong. The community is very interested in making sure that the most important thing to this community is to making sure that these new units and any kind of regulation of these new units will protect our neighborhoods. And a particular concern, at least in the meetings that we heard this fall, were in early of 2017, were parking, lack of open space, and overcrowding. So these are the issues that we have tried to address in the draft ordinance that was attached to the memo that you received today. Granted, we are consistent with this ordinance that we have drafted is consistent with, we believe, with the state's intent. And we are going out for further outreach to the community to explain what's being proposed now and to get further input. To that end, last night, staff went to the executive board of Comlink and offered our services in terms of attending any meetings that their neighborhood association members would have. I believe we have about 6 meetings now scheduled, upcoming. In addition to that, at our Planning Commission meeting last night, the Planning Commission asked that they have a workshop on this item before it was heard before them for discussion. So we are trying to pack this into a very tight schedule. We are hoping to have something adopted that reflects the community's values in the next few months before the end of the year, because as you said, The city is very concerned about the number of applications that we have received since January 1st and their potential impacts on the community. So that if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I'm looking here at the draft, and looks like there's additional consideration if there is open space deficiency, which makes sense, because we need open space. Then there's the issue of non-conforming status. No accessory dwelling unit may be constructed on a parcel which is already non-conforming to the parking provisions. That item seems to make sense, but the law was pretty specific that it shouldn't be based on criteria related to parking. So I wonder how appropriate this item is or not.
We will continue to review that.
Okay. Yeah, if you could, because one of the things I worry about is somebody later on says, hey, throw this whole thing out because
No,
you have
we
a provision regarding
That's
parking.
correct.
And there was quite a bit of specificity about that. So is open space currently the only consideration that staff is saying we could use as additional consideration on where these are permitted?
One of the most significant pieces of the state legislation was called the Parking Exemption, which says that if you are within a half mile of transit, you have to exempt the accessory dwelling unit from all parking requirements. So that means that they would not be required, they could not be required to provide any parking for the accessory dwelling units. Now, this is incredibly problematic for Santa Ana because we have transit lines throughout our city, and if you draw a half a mile from our transit lines, we cover all but about 5 acres on the southwest corner and about 6 acres on the northeast corner of the city. And that's it. Every other place is exempted. So this is a huge impact on our city. What we have learned, though, further definition of the law is that individual cities are allowed to define public transit. Originally, we thought we had to use the same public transit definition as used related to
Right.
affordable housing. So we are trying to revise. We have defined our public transit as transit lines with 15-minute or less headways, and also not the entire line, but only the stops on those lines. Now, we are currently working out what the implications of that will be, but we believe it will reduce it somewhat, the impact of that somewhat. And we will have, but that's how we have currently defined it in this draft ordinance.
Okay, and at the bottom of page 4, it makes mention of parking requirements. So it says all accessory dwelling units must meet the following parking standards in addition to the required parking. There should be one. There shall be provided one parking space per bedroom, with a minimum of one per dwelling unit. Is that allowable to request to require a
That
parking
is-
space given the restrictions of the law?
Yes, it is. We can require parking, however, we have to exempt those units that are eligible by this parking exemption for transit, locations adjacent to transit.
Okay. What about, I know we're using as one significant standard the amount of open space that's available. I know in past, either in this committee or in separate meetings, we have had discussed deficiencies of other things such as water availability, sewer infrastructure, police services, things of that sort. Were we not able to figure out how to
We
have the
did.
adequate findings for that, or?
Yes, we did. We did examine those issues, and we're not able to come up with any appropriate findings based on lack of public services or what we have done, though, that is within the letter of the state law is you are allowed to have provisions. You can make provisions which would be allow you to reduce setbacks from the property lines. So most communities that want to encourage these are reducing their setbacks maybe to only to building standards. So we have chosen to not reduce our setbacks to ensure that we continue to have the appropriate amount of open space, because that's consistent with the idea that the lack of parks and open space is a service or a factor. One of the things that we are rather unique in is that we have the city is very concerned about open space and has been for quite some time. And so perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, we increased our single-family rear yard setback to 20 feet. So we have a minimum required 20-foot front yard setback as well as a minimum of 20 feet in the rear yard setback. And that could have an impact, that will have an impact on the amount of open space and lot coverage on individual lots.
So this draft ordinance, does it say we've got to maintain those with, even if there is an additional unit in the back, or?
We did the opposite. We did not exempt them from our setbacks, and so they are required to maintain. As a result of not exempting them, they're required to maintain it.
Okay. Have we, given that staff has begun to assess this issue of open space deficiency, have you done some type of GIS mapping assessment so you can give us a rough indication of, given particularly that, anything else, what percentage of the city would not be eligible for by right granting flats?
Yes, we have. It is consistent. We used that standard in our previous ordinance, and I don't have an exact number, but
Can you estimate?
I would say it's somewhere between a third to a half.
A third to a half, meaning that potentially up to the half we could still have it by right. Now, for
No, it's the opposite of that.
well, half
a
is a
third
half.
to the half is, well, a half is a half. Yeah, no, no,
Right.
but no, it's probably a third is permitted where it is permitted by right. I think it's a third to a half where it's permitted
So there's
by
a third's
right.
permitted by half.
Yeah.
Right. But you said up to 50%. So
I probably
being
did.
conservative. On back to the water and sewer infrastructure, how on what basis does staff believe that our water and sewer infrastructure is not over capacity at this point or lacking in maintenance?
We had asked the Public Works Agency to provide us with documentation of areas in which it was not up to standard and which it could be considered problematic for the additional of accessory dwelling units. And they found no area in the city where they could support a finding like that. So.
What about on the issue of police services? I know that, based off of FBI ratios of population to the number of officers, we are pretty deficient in the number of officers per capita. Has that been looked at yet?
We can look at it, but we have to, but it may be problematic. It may cause other issues that we may not want to address, because if our police services are deficient, one of the areas that would be, it has to be something that would not affect the whole city. So throughout the ordinance, throughout the legislation adopted by the state of California, which is sort of silly. We live in a state, but we cannot make any findings or provide restrictions that would unduly burden the development of these dwelling units, create in a manner that burdens development of ADUs. Rather, it should maximize the potential of ADU development. And that's language directly from the legislation. So we need to be careful in what we do, so that we craft an ordinance that does not create these burdens, that it could be found to not be consistent with the state ordinance.
But the law also says you can restrict, but it just can't be on the basis of parking standards. It can be on the basis of other city services that are deficient. You know, when one looks at, a city, really the main kinds of services or infrastructure are, water, sewer, parks, maybe libraries, but public safety services, it's clearly an issue. It's clearly a jurisdiction that cities know about, and there are national standards on things like that. So I still don't know that I've heard a compelling reason why the lack of public safety services can't be used.
It has to not. We will look into it with the attorneys. We'll do further research on it, and we will ask the city if there are areas within the city in which police services are not sufficient.
Okay, so in other words, that hasn't been assessed then yet, or?
We have discussed it as a possible means of something that we would research, and the idea was thrown out because of the lack of defined geographic areas within the city in which we could say that we did not have sufficient police services.
Right. Yeah, I would really like our staff and PD and Attorney's Office to look at that, because I think, there are various standards, whether it be the FBI standard of police officers to population. You also have response times. You have, the number of people on shift for patrol, just the number of calls for service. And, in some parts of the city, there is more density than others. So I think you could, based off of density, say that in certain areas they are more likely to be harmed because of this lack of service. And already we face numbers, and again, we have stats that the cities can call upon in terms of the numbers of calls for service for police or complaints regarding response time. I think there is substantial information and documentation on how most portions of the city are lacking in particularly police services. And to add additional individuals to most neighborhoods would make it even worse. And then unfortunately, it's in lower income neighborhoods, more dense neighborhoods where there are more calls for services, more crime. So I think they would be disproportionately hurt by the yet additional number of units in their neighborhoods. But enough for me on that. Please let's follow up on that, and maybe in addition to this meeting, I do want to have a follow up about what other items may have been considered other than open space deficiency. But with that, let me see if my colleague here has any questions, and then we'll go to
No questions. No
Very
questions.
good. Thank you. Let's now then go to our speakers, and I'll let folks speak, and then we'll just let staff respond appropriately at the end of all the speakers, because there probably is going to be some overlap. So let's start with, I have Nancy Lutz, I have Susan Vanderbelt or Vanderbest, I can't. Okay, Vanderus, followed by Janelle Hardy and Mary Thornton. So let's start with Nancy Lutz.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Lutz. I am a resident of Washington Square. I have lived in Santa Ana all my life, and I am concerned about the issue of the accessory dwelling units in the entire city, not just our neighborhood. Washington Square has had accessory units built, before this whole process came up. And I am concerned about, who in the city is looking after our neighborhoods. There seems to be an overwhelming concern about, and I know we're having to comply with some laws, but it seems like we're going out of our way to bend to accommodate those units that will be added to our community, adding further stress on the services, Councilmember Solario, that you were alluding to, our fire, our water, all of our services. And so I'm concerned about that. But in the whole presentation that I heard here just a moment ago, I heard the words problematic numerous times. And I've also heard the fact that you are anxious to get this, resolved by year end, with or without the entire community's input. And I think that there needs to be some accommodation to the neighborhoods, because I think that we can share with you what our communities are like. You can talk with certain people, but we're living here day to day, putting up with services in parking issues and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I think that would be really beneficial to the ordinance, and that is to assure that any applicants are owner occupied. So that would be something that would assure us of some person who is just a absentee landlord just popping units on all of their facilities and taking advantage of the opportunity to have another income, but not adding to the community. So those are just some of my concerns and my thoughts. Nancy Lutz, Washington Square.
Very good. And again, let's answer at the end.
Oh, okay.
Because there'll be overlap. So let's just continue with the testimony. Let's go next to Susan Vanderest. I'm getting closer.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Vanderoos. I live in Washington Square as well. And I want to thank you guys all, everybody that's here tonight, because I can see that we're all interested in the best Santa Ana that we can have. I'm very concerned about the ADUs. And I called today Tom Daly's office, Governor Brown's office, and Janet Nguyen. And in regard to public safety, and I expressed it to them as well, and I said, what can we do? Because the last time I was in this very room with many of you, we are unfortunately short in officers to serve the community of Santa Ana. And I know personally, and I head up the neighborhood association, the neighborhood watch in our neighborhood, that when we call the police, the non-emergency line for help, we most of the time don't get any service. I've been told by the dispatcher that we really can only respond to life and death. Is this life and death? No. 2 hours later, we'll get a call and say, do you still need an officer? By then, the drug deal that's going down or whatever's going down has moved on. So the public safety issue, I agree with you, is just huge. So I'm no expert in how all this can be done, but I know we want the best. I know Governor Brown wanted the best, and I don't think he intended to put such a burden on Santa Ana. So I was asking them, can we go for an exemption? Would you consider that? Instead of us making a big rush, let's get the input, like Nancy said, and like you really all want, for what's best. And I did not get shut down by any of the offices. They're willing to meet with us, and we can get an extension. But let's not put the whole city at risk. We don't have enough police officers right now, let alone with the infrastructure. Let's give it our best. We live here. We want to go for the long haul. So just please consider that, and I am more than willing to work on that and connect and be a liaison to facilitate that type of a move. Thanks.
Thank you. Janelle Hardy?
Hello, my name's Janelle Hardy. I've been a 30-year resident in Hettinger Park neighborhood, and I do appreciate what I'm seeing, the effort in this draft ordinance. I did have a couple questions. It says we'll have only one detached single-family residence permitted. Does that mean either within the residence or freestanding? And then the other question is, I'm not quite sure how it works with the conversion of an existing accessory dwelling unit. It seems like there's some exemptions, but I'm not sure I'm reading it correctly. So thank you.
Very good. Next, let's go to Mary Thornton.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Thornton. I'm a resident of Wilshire Square. I've lived here since 1993. I'm here with my neighbor, Irma Haragi, who's in the background. We're representing Wilshire Square. And I do want to say, Candida, I want to thank you and your staff, because I think this ordinance has got the bones of what I think will address the majority of residents' concerns. So thank you for working hard to address the concerns. I think a lot of us are feeling like we haven't had enough time to really know what's going on, so I'm glad to hear that you're going to have a planning commission workshop and maybe some other meetings and do some outreach, and if we could get that schedule and get you to come to neighborhood meetings, we'd really appreciate that. I have multiple questions on this, so I'll just read off what my questions are. Number one, I read through the state requirements, and they said that permits can be denied because of privacy concerns of surrounding neighbors. So I'd like to see something built into the ordinance that when a permit is applied for, that the contiguous neighbors on either side or behind are somehow notified, so they have an opportunity to view those plans and then know when that decision is going to be made. If they want to make a comment or respond, that they can do that before the permit is issued, not after the unit is starting to be built. So I think that's something that should be taken into account. I also would echo that taking public safety concerns into account is something that the law allows, so I think that should be investigated further, like Councilman Solorio suggested. Also, if you want to have owner-occupied, on one of the parcels on the lot, I would suggest that the ordinance builds in really stiff fines for noncompliance. I see there's some wording in there about, you take legal avenues, et cetera, but I don't know, but I think ordinances have the ability to say noncompliance, like fine of $1,000 a day, something so that it really puts some teeth behind it, because as we all know, you can write anything into a law, but having the people to go out and enforce it is the other question. And I can easily see that this would, people would maybe live there for a few months or 6 months, and then you'd have 2 rentals that run downhill. I also have concerns about conversions. It's not really clear from this ordinance what's going to happen to all the illegal accessory units we have in the city right now that are built into garages or that are freestanding units already that maybe have never been permitted. How are those going to be handled? I think that's a concern that a lot of people have. We have a lot of those in our neighborhood. We do have some secondary units, like Irma has a permitted secondary unit where her in-laws live, but there's a lot of units, either lean-tos that have been built or garages that are occupied or homes that are being used as 4 families, each family living in a room, and no one really is the owner. How are those going to be handled once this ordinance goes into place? And the other question I have, actually this is a question to Candida, did you do benchmarking with other county cities around the state that have put these ordinances in, and was that helpful in trying to figure out what was within the law or not? Okay, if you could speak to that a little bit, I would like it. And I'd also like to know how you came up with 6,000 square feet as the minimum lot size for accessory dwelling units. That's it.
Very good.
Thank you.
The Honorable Tom Lutz.
I still retain that title.
Yes, you did.
Tom Lutz, I'm with Washington Square. My position with Washington Square by the Board of Directors is I'm the city liaison for the neighborhood. So what I do is I work with the city and so on and so forth. The city comes to me with projects. And there used to be a time when the city did come to the neighborhoods when there were issues like this that were confronting our cities. They came to the neighborhood associations. They addressed what the situation was. They asked for input. As I say, I'm the city liaison. I have been that for the past 3 years. I never heard anything about this, read it in the paper. I've attended 2 meetings, or maybe 3 meetings, one at the Comlink, and one here about 4 months ago when we had this again, or 5 months ago. At that time, Director Hassan said there's no plan on doing anything with this ordinance. There was no direction. He said, besides if there was direction, we don't have enough city staff people in order to even address this. Curious, why is all of a sudden we have the ability to go ahead and address this, and it's slam dunk, thank you, ma'am, we've got to get this thing done. As a city liaison for our neighborhood, I would like to request someone from the city staff to come and make a presentation to our neighborhood association regarding the additional dwelling units. Hearing many questions that Mary just read off, this is a lot of good questions that need to be answered. So when this ordinance is done, I request a meeting at our neighborhood association so our residents can hear what's going on, and hopefully you will do that with other neighborhoods as well as Comlink. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the time.
Very good. Thank you. Very briefly, yes.
Throughout the state, pamphlet that they put out describing all these bills and what the goal was, they talk all the time about affordable housing in there. But I don't see anything in those laws that says that this is affordable housing other than for the people who are going to be building it, because they're reducing fees, waiving things. I don't see anything in the laws that says these have to be rented at affordable rates. And in my view, we have a housing crisis here everywhere in California, certainly here in Santa Ana, but we have an affordable housing crisis. So is there anything the city can do to assure that these units are rented at affordable rates? Is that within the scope of this law or any other? Like, for example, could they all be required to be Section 8 housing eligible? That's just a question I have for the staff. But I think that's, to me, the way this law is written, it's a bonus. It's a big giveaway to people who want to earn extra income from rents and to builders, but not necessarily to the people who need the housing.
Very good. I mean, I don't know that in this source it's the intent to address all aspects of what you're asking, but in general terms, I would suggest that part of the reason why I think something like this is viewed as affordable housing is that there's already the ownership for that land, so that when you build a unit like this, you're only having to pay for the materials and labor for that, and not the additional amount of land, as well as if it's by right, there typically is less than entitlement issues and costs. So I think, from the state perspective, that's generally speaking, I'm sure part of the reason they consider this affordable housing. Candida, there were a number of questions, and we know there's going to be additional outreach, and we know that some of these folks are going to be at those meetings as well. So if you can do your best to try to address, the issues that were raised.
The first issue is we do require the units to be owner-occupied. That's part of the ordinance as it's written. Regarding the public safety, as we mentioned, we will be looking into that further, consulting with our legal advisors on that. There is only, it may be confusing, and I would be happy to meet with you and discuss what is allowed and what isn't allowed. The state defines 3 different types of units. So one unit is attached to the main house. One unit is conversion of a portion of the main house, and then the other one is detached. And so those are defined in the ordinance as it's currently written, and the state allows different standards for each of those. So we can go through them in detail if you like in a different forum, and that probably will include that. It's good to know we will include that in our neighborhood outreach meetings. Exemptions per existing units. The law says that, by that I'm assuming that if they have an existing legal unit, the question was, do they get out of jail? Do they get to do another one? And the answer is no. There's only one unit per lot, and that's period. Regarding neighborhood meetings, we went to Comlink last night, and we asked because we felt like that was the most effective way for us to communicate to all of the neighborhood associations. But we will be doing follow-up with that as well. They were going to ask their members internally, each of their member neighborhood associations, if they wanted a presentation, and we're going to help us coordinate. But I will take all of your names and numbers for those of you tonight. Regarding privacy concerns, I've not read that in the law, so we will go back and research that. Public, again, we talked a little bit about public safety, owner occupancy. We can follow up with the enforcement nature on that. They will be subject to regular code enforcement operations, which include standard fines. So, yeah. Impact on illegal units. This will have no impact on illegal units. It will not make them legal. They will continue to be illegal if they are illegal. And multiple family occupancy, again, that's another illegal provision of our law. Regarding benchmarking, we did look at what other communities did. However, many communities, it's about half and half, or I would say probably maybe 60-40, in that many communities want to encourage these units. I mean, so their ordinances would not be, are not really what we're looking at, but we did look at what other communities were. You asked why this is affordable, and basically it's affordable because, as the council member said, it's on different. But there, one of the things that was requested by one of the advocacy groups, the Kennedy Commission for more housing, is that we require them to be 30-year covenanted, which is the same thing we do when the state provides funds to large affordable housing. And so they have to enter into a commitment that they be for 35, 30, 55 years, but they requested 30 years. So that's not something that's currently in the ordinance, but it may be something we might want to research as well. And why, the question is, why is this being addressed now? Why are we looking at this ordinance now? We have had a number, and I'm not going to quote the number because I don't know what it is today, but probably close to as many units as were permitted and built in the 13-year period that our old ordinance was in effect. We probably have a similar or more either inquiries, applications, or building permits issued. So we did feel, previously the direction was that we were not going to pursue this. We were going to just comply with the state law and administer the state law as required. But we are bringing it up now because it is a concern to the city and the council. So that is the response to the timing of it.
Can you hold those permits for a certain amount of days?
Yeah, we're not going to do question and answer here. There's going to be additional outreach, and we can do that then. Yeah. Thank you very much. Anything else, council member? I want to thank the staff. I know a lot of work has been done, from prior meetings to now. Again, just in general terms, and I hinted at the beginning of the meeting, I know there's some interest by the public to do quite a bit of more meetings, but it's one of those things, watch what you wish for. If you really do want another 100 meetings, that'll take maybe another year or two. And so in the meantime, you'll have another, several dozen of these built. So I do worry about, how much additional outreach we do as it relates to the time to do that. I think just as long as we get staff on the right path, and they're I think making some progress, that we do want action sooner than later so we can stop the growth. I think prior to this year, there were, I think, less than a half a dozen of these granny units that were done, or accessory units, and yet this year, January to now, we've received, how many applications have we received in general terms? I want to say a couple dozen. I think
probably more than that, but
yeah. So we're on route maybe by the end of the year having, I don't know, let's say roughly 50 approved. And again, if you happen to be in an area that already lacks parking, open space, public safety, etc., I worry about them. And then, everything else, once an ordinance is put into law, that doesn't mean that down the road we can't add to it or make amendments. So it's not like if we need to, have it perfect. We just need to have, I think, some protections for the neighborhoods, but sooner than later, because the people that are anxious to implement something are doing it now. And typically, when new laws get passed, that's when you see a flurry of activity. So, realistically, the people that want to do something like that, they're doing it now. And so, a year or two after this law's kind of faded away, generally, interest tends to slow down. But I do want to thank staff for its willingness to continue to do outreach and keep the council abreast of these issues. I don't know if our city manager or anybody else has any other comments, but I think we covered a lot of the key issues with this. Next, we have item the 3, which is the homelessness item. But that may be a lengthy item as well. I'd prefer to do items 4, 5, and 6, but in a very abbreviated format. Let's start with item number 4, an update on the Mariscos Hector and its impact to the neighborhood. Even on this side, I'm not even exactly sure why it's coming to our committee, but obviously staff feels that there's such a need. So if we can get a brief update.
One of your colleagues asked that the Public Safety Committee look at this because of concerns about the operation and impacting the safety of some of the neighborhoods around the different locations. So we'll make it very quick, but we would just ask if we would bring it to your attention and see if you had further guidance to us.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, council members, city manager. Canada was going to start all this off, and I don't know where she went, so in the essence of time, we'll just move forward.
Yes, please.
It's my understanding that the Morisco's Hector location at 1208 East McFadden is looking to transfer from a Type 41 to Type 47 ABC license. As such, we routinely examine various different calls for service and police-related factors in and around establishments when they change or request to change ABC license statuses. The location at 1208 East McFadden is part of Census Tract 744.03. It is ranked number 18th in 100 out of 103 policing grids for the city. That means it's the 18th highest policing grid in the city. There were 7 incidents of police activity at 1208 East McFadden in the past year. 2 of those incidents were specifically tied with police reports. In the 100 block of 1200 East McFadden, there were 113 police incidents over that time period with 24 reports taken. I've talked to the Planning Commission before, and I think it's important to bring to your attention that
And has the Planning Commission acted on this yet, going to, or what's the status there?
I'm not sure. We'll have to ask Canada when she gets back.
Okay.
It is my understanding, or when we talk about police statistics for various locations, it's important that we all understand, unless specifically with bars or restaurants, a lot of the problems that center around those locations deal with alcohol. We have a lot of concerns and questions about people that drunk drive or problems that occur in the parking lot surrounding the alcohol activity. With that being said, when we stop somebody for drunk driving, we generally don't ask them and don't have a way to catalog where were you drinking.
Right.
So we don't have the statistics necessary to be able to tie specific activity back to specific locations. When we talk about 7 incidents of police activity, that means that there were 7 calls for service at 1208 East McFadden, that specific spot. Out of those 7, and again, this goes to speak specifically to the calls for service at that location, we took an arson report, we had a trespass report, we got a call of a subject who was causing a fight, we had a family fight there, and we had a transient that was causing problems, and we had a drunk.
So overall, all the numbers of calls and types is above average crime in this area, in this site?
In that area, they are ranked in the top 18, or they are the 18th most busy policing district out of our 103. It is above the level when the Planning Commission considers this type of activity.
Candida, can you give us an update on the Planning Commission? Have they heard this? What actions, if any, have they taken?
They have not taken any action. We do have an entitlement for that, and they are generally operating within the parameters of their CUP. However, if we can demonstrate that there is additional concern, we can respond to. We can contact the
ABC.
owners of the property and ABC.
And the commission has decided not to do that, or why do you
We
think?
have not brought that option forward to them. This
Okay.
request was.
So I guess that would be my only recommendation, that we do take those recommendations as options to the Planning Commission, and that they consider it seriously. That is a very dense part of town with a lack of services and high levels of crime, etc. And it'd be good for the neighborhood to not make the situation worse. Councilmember Villegas, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So over at this location, I went to the Mini Street Neighborhood Association meeting, and there was a lot of complaints there regarding this facility. And so I told them, we would look at it, myself and the other council member present. And there was a lot of complaints with parking. There was complaints of drinking. They're not good neighbors. That's the chief complaint that I hear from a lot of folks in the area. So from them changing or requesting to change their alcohol license from one to another, I don't know if that'd be a good idea if they can't be a good neighbor with the first license they have. So, we need to look. I didn't know it was that busy with all the calls, ranked. That's pretty high for a restaurant.
And the area, yeah.
And the area.
Yeah.
So
and
I was
that's
at
a busy area too.
Yeah, I was at that meeting with you, and
yes, sir.
The complaints that the neighbors brought up. I have heard similar types of complaints about the drinking in the parking lot. There is a complaint about some type of valet service that occurs with the parking in the parking lot or something. There's no violations that we can find for that specific issue. We also have transient issues in and around that specific lot. I'm sure we're all aware of the Standard and McFadden area, as well as the transient issues that are in the rear along the railroad tracks. So it is a very, very busy and densely populated area of our city. Yes, sir.
I believe the owners went to the Planning Commission regarding asking for the permit to be changed, their license, and I don't know if they withdrew. I heard something. I'm not too clear on it, but that had come up about them being a good neighbor, and there was a lot of other calls for service being related to that. A lot of problems were coming out of that area, especially the parking. They were parking, and there was just a big mess. A lot of neighbors were complaining, so I suggest we continue to monitor it, and then and I don't see anyone here from the restaurant to come and speak on their behalf. So,
and I think this just was an update to our committee here.
Those are my comments. Thank
you. That does remind me, and I know there's multiple sites with the word Hector in it. I do recall that there was one discretionary item they had before the Planning Commission that I think that they had withdrawn. Is that a separate interest than this?
Actually, it was one that the Planning Commission denied.
Okay.
The applicant initially appealed to you, and then they withdrew their appeal.
So this is a separate item?
It was this one. It was the one on McFadden, and that was the one where they applied to get hard liquor, to expand their license for hard liquor. Planning Commission denied it based on the testimony of the neighbors. They were uncomfortable with expanding the use. The property owner appealed it. They filed for an appeal, and then they ultimately withdrew the appeal.
So the Planning Commission then
you.
has denied.
The Planning Commission denied it. There is no appeal.
So for right now, then really this issue is dead.
The issue's dead.
There's no reason to then take it back to the Planning Commission, and be my preference that we just leave it as it is.
Pardon?
Is it a different address?
It's a different address. That's that insurance standard.
Okay.
That's an insurance standard.
Again, that's what I asked. That it gets a little confusing because there's a
there
few
are three
with it
different
in the name.
facilities. Actually, there's 4 different facilities with that name.
Right.
In the city.
Which is why it gets confusing. Okay.
And so, I'm sorry. Yes, but you were asking about the one that they applied and were denied, and that is the one on Ed Insurance.
A separate one.
Yes.
A separate one.
Yes.
So on this one, though, they do have an active application to make this change to a different kind of license. What's the status of their request? Where is their request?
They have no request. They have an active license, and they have an approved CUP.
For this type of liquor?
For beer and wine. For beer and wine. The McFadden has.
Okay. I thought I understood that they're requesting a different type of license.
So the McFadden location has a Type 41, and they want to go to a Type 47. That's my understanding of why we're here. The 1801 South Main.
Yeah. Let's just pause here and bring it back. This is extremely confusing, and we'll just stop it here. And we'll,
So for
we'll-
clarification, by the way, that's the one that, for me, that's the one that from the Neighborhood Association.
Correct. 1208 East McFadden is
That's
the
all I
one
wanted.
that has a
Yes.
41
Very good.
and wants to go to 47. and
let's
that's why
let's
we're
just
here.
have a written memo with an update, but you've received some.
Thank you very much.
Some comment from here. Let's go to item number 5, an update on open government police operations. Chief Valentin.
Thank you, David Valentin, Acting Chief of Police, Chairman, and Council Member Villegas. This is informational for something that we hopefully intend to put in motion fairly quickly. The background on it is that both the community and council members have been repeatedly requesting enhanced transparency of police operations. And so for that purpose and in that effort, we intend to move forward with providing that information to the public on our website. What we'd like to do is provide the following 3 different reports initially, and we can add to that platform as we move forward. The first is use of force incident information to include officer-involved shootings. I think one of the interesting pieces of information there for the public that, for whatever reason, we previously didn't share is the frequency of calls for service in the area of about 12,000 per month, and yet the ratio of incidents in which officers use force can be less than 0.25%. So that's a key piece of information that I think we need to share openly with the public, and we intend to do that on our website. At the bottom, we'll just add another tile and include that information. The next piece is community complaint information. Again, this should never be a secret. We want to publicize and inform the public the frequency at which community members make complaints and what the disposition of those complaints are. Once upon a time, we used to provide an annual report of that type of activity, and so as we move forward, we intend to do that as well. And then the third piece is really information that's already open source and available to the public. It's just in a different location, and that's the FBI Part 1 crime, which includes murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, theft, and motor vehicle and arson. Those statistics are publicized a year in the rear, so we have a full capture of 2015. It's my understanding the first 6 months of 2016. So we intend to publicize that information as well on our department website so that folks don't have to go out searching elsewhere. So those are the 3 areas. And again, those are the areas that I initially identified in conversations with all of you as council members, the full council individually, and also with command staff and with community members.
Very good. This is excellent. I know as we move towards a path of having an open data platform, this is a very good start, because in the past we've had very little, if any, information on our website about crime stats. So this is very good. I also have noticed that there's more information on our Facebook and Twitter pages that are very helpful. I know the public's given me a lot of great compliments about that, so I appreciate that. I know, too, that it's easier and easier to have Facebook and Twitter page interfaces with websites, so to the extent that our web and IT people can have your Facebook and Twitter feeds on the PD web page, that would be helpful, since that is a good ongoing way of providing information to the public. That would be excellent.
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas, anything? No? Thank you. Good update.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Next, we have. Let me get back to my agenda here. Update on police officer hiring. We have a handout here, and this is typically a presentation at each meeting. So, if we can start the presentation.
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to be here tonight to provide an update on where we're at with our police officer hiring. Just a review of the numbers. These are total sworn positions, so it includes from the chief down to officer. In the general fund, we have 369. Within our special revenue funds, 11 sworn officers, which includes 4 in the downtown and 7 in Civic Center, and 3 grant-funded sworn positions, 2 funded by UASI grant, 1 funded for our PAL program, for a total of 383 sworn positions, again, from the chief down to officer. Of those positions, we have 319 positions filled and 64 vacancies across all funding sources. Just to note that the number of police officer positions filled includes 12 police recruits currently in the academy. The number of police officers hired to date includes 21, 14 police recruits, and 7 laterals. We have a total of 14 that are in the process right now. They're looking very, very promising. 8 recruits and 6 laterals, and additional applicants in the pipeline that we're hoping to complete by the end of the year. What we're finding out is over the last few years, we've done several things to improve efficiency and increase capacity within the backgrounds unit and HR. Things such as adding the NeoGov electronic requisitioning to speed the CERT process. We've added eSoft software to the backgrounds unit to make the background process very much more efficient. We've added some background staff to a total of 5.5 full-time equivalents. And what we're realizing that what we're trying to do within our available resources and what we will be doing, working with the budget office and the city manager's office through our normal budget processes, is work to try to increase capacity as much as possible. Some of the things that we're reviewing are additional background staff, a senior office assistant for the backgrounds unit, and what that will do is provide an extra body to do the clerical work that's currently being done by our backgrounds personnel. So we want to free those people up to do actual background work. A police officer lateral incentive program to attract police officers from other agencies to Santa Ana. Additional money to continue to advertise and market the police officer vacancies. And some money for recruitment overtime. This is monies that are used to fund overtime for police officers to go out to events such as CrossFit events, fitness events, military recruiting events, and others with our display. These guys are dressed in Class A, looking sharp, sharing information, gathering contact information from potential candidates, and contacting those individuals after the fact to share information on how they could become successful Santa Ana police officers. It's that we've found that we've had a lot of success in that providing that extra that special touch, and we want to continue to do that with identifying additional overtime.
Are all these recurring items with the exception of the lateral program, or what here is new?
Some of these, the senior office assistant is a new position that we want to work on. The additional background investigator position is something new that we're trying to add. The advertising and marketing and the recruitment overtime, those were previously funded through our equitable sharing program, and the funding there isn't what it was last year, so we're having to hold off on those. We are continuing to do recruitment events that in the past have been highly successful. We're just having to be more very selective. We'd like to open that up and do more of that.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. The lateral program we do not have, so
Got
we
it.
need to try to identify some funds for that.
Okay, next slide.
Currently, there's 12 recruits in the academy. We have 3 in class 228, which is graduating in November. We got 9 recruits graduating from class 229 in January. And we have currently 12 trainees in the training program. So a total of 24 at various stages of the academy and FTO training program that we're hoping to get on the streets as soon as possible. Got a lot of people working hard, trying to hire as fast as we can, and be glad to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we just have a couple? How many officers do we anticipate are retiring this? I think this information is a calendar year. No,
Correct.
Calendar year. So for the calendar year, how many anticipated retirements do we have of sworn officers?
I'm estimating low 20s. We've had 18 separations to date this calendar year. Again,
18, you said?
18.
Okay.
From the chief down to police officer position. But as you know, we just the POA has a new MOU. So we think because of that, we're hoping to retain officers at a much higher rate. So we're hoping to less separations, more hires, and at the end of the year, try to net as many as we can.
Yeah, that's helpful to have a lower retirement ratio, and I think the longevity of other items in the new contract hopefully should be helpful. This is good progress, and I do see the ads and the work being done. But I believe last year we managed to hire 43, I believe. So we're looking at 35 for this year. To what do we anticipate having less people being hired this year than last year?
Well, last year was a very successful year with the 43. Well, we're trying to hire as many as we can. We'd love to hire 50. But last year, hiring 43 was the most we had hired in a long time. So we're hoping to be somewhere in that range, low 40s, high 30s. It's hard to put our finger on it exactly, but again, capacity is really what we're focusing on to increase those numbers. So we feel we've done quite a bit on the efficiency side. Now it's just having those resources in place to not having to choose between, do I complete the background for this applicant or this applicant? Right. We want to be able to do both.
But somebody could ask, though, and say, well, last year we had the same number of staff and resources to do that work compared to this year. So why last year were we able to do 43 and this year only 35? Because if anything, this year's when we started spending marketing dollars and some of the previous positions that we hired to help, particular in backgrounds, those are new resources. We essentially had more resources and effort this year than the past year. And I know there's no magic answers to why things are the way they are, but I'm just looking for insights.
Councilman, what I would say is that every agency is having challenges finding and hiring and recruiting the very, very best talent. So it's always a balance test. I mean, we talk to some of the other agencies that have to hire hundreds and hundreds, and the way they do it is they lower their standards to get anybody in. We feel the Santa Ana community deserves the very best. So that's who we try to pick through. We're trying to get more people into the recruiting process. But at the end of the day, it's only the best candidates that are going to make it through. So it is a challenge. Everybody's facing it, but like Robert was saying, I mean, last year was exceptional. This year is still a very good year, and the people that we are hiring, even by our own officer standards, we get complimented in the hallways saying, "Hey, the people that you're hiring are very good officers." So it's a balance.
Okay, well, I appreciate the update. And we'll just continue to work it hard again. Right now, today we have 64 vacant positions, and because of retirements, I mean, that really means we should be filling about, 80 to 90 really to get to that number. So if we can continue to work hard, and I would strive that we each year try to be at par or increase in the number that we're doing. And maybe some of these new, action items will help. I know the other thing that has been discussed, more informally, kind of similar to the police officer lateral incentive program, is maybe having a bonus program for recruits. if we don't have already, are making that robust. Or I know Chief Valentin has mentioned maybe academy programs that have fewer weeks in them, because some people don't want to wait 6 months for whatever it is to be a full-time officer. So that might be helpful. And I know we're competing with all these other agencies around us, so maybe it's other agencies are ramping up as well. So I know it is difficult out there, obviously, but 64 vacancies in a city where people aren't getting their calls answered, where you have shootings and homicides and people getting run over and all these other issues, we really do a great disservice to allow 64 vacancies in our police department. So those are my comments. Councilmember Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we lose on average 28, 30, 32 people or officers a year out of retirement or injury. How many people are out injured at the moment? Do we know?
I don't know that offhand, no.
So we have 319 filled, and I understand that number of them, but we have people that are, IOD. There's a good number out there. Some of them are out for a while. I know we lose, so an average of 28 to 30 folks. We hired, 43 you said last year? Last year 43, and we lost about 30. So we gained 13. And we need officers now. And I've been saying that. We all been saying that. They're pro-public safety. The community, every time I go to a neighborhood association, that's all they tell me. We need more officers. Are we getting more officers? Everywhere I go. And I see it, and I know, and I see the strain on our officers, because they're very, very hardworking professionals. But a person, they're human. They can only take so much. We need help. I know you need help. And I know we have room in the budget to hire 50 more. Well, I know 64, right? 64, and I don't think we're even going to get to that number. I mean, we can get close to it. It'd be great. I'm not for lowering the standards. I'm not for less than 6 month academy, because it's the training that's needed now is very, very necessary. That's the standards at the moment. But I just all I can say is keep up the good work. I know you folks are trying really hard, and hopefully we can get. I know it's hard to get some good folks. I know we have some of the best recruits. I've been told from the staff here that the ones that come over from the sheriff's department, pretty good people, and we have 24 in various stages at the moment. But again, we need help, but that doesn't mean, I'm not saying lower the standards. I'm never going to say that. We don't need that, because we deserve, the people of Santa Ana deserve better than that. But we really, really need to work hard. If we can get some more folks to run people through backgrounds. How many applicants do we have a year?
How many?
Because a background officer can only do so much, right? Yeah. So.
I mean, I would say that we have probably close to 1,000 coming through the top, through the application process.
And then when they get to background, how many are in background, roughly?
Currently have, I think we currently have 25 in backgrounds.
Yeah, because we really need the help, as you know, you folks. I'm echoing what everyone else is feeling. It's just need to stress on it, and I'm going to continue. Because everyone's asking for it and we need it, and my family needs it, your family needs it out here, the residents, the people that do business here, the visitors, all them folks that are coming to our city, they need to have that. It's a priority. Public safety is a priority in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just remember as well that another way to also make a big dent in this high number of vacancies is we got to hire park rangers, police service officers, and I know in the past we've kind of held them to the same standard of post-certified and all the rest, but I think there are other classifications or requirements that you could have for police, park rangers, as well as you can have police service officers that can also provide additional assistance to the department, and community-oriented policing. I know the community was promised more community policing officers. They all don't necessarily need to be post-certified, so I think just some changes on the classifications and how we look at what we're trying to fill, that we can fill some folks. And again, the community is also very desperate for park rangers. I mean, we have 50 plus parks, but we only have one full-time park ranger. One. We have another one, maybe 1.5, if you count in, overtime, police officer time. And oftentimes for these park ranger duties, part of what you need to is folks to go out there. Are the lights on? Is there camping? Is there illegal activity? Do you need to call for backup? Are there obstructions? Are there things of that sort? And that would also be of big help to the community. And then oftentimes it's just simple presence. Just having a black and white car or some type of city vehicle there on site, so that anybody wanting to create problems knows that there's some, surveillance and supervision there. That would go a long way in our community. So let's really strive higher. I think earlier this year when we were having a similar presentation, I asked what the goal was for the number of folks that we want to hire this year, and there was no goal. And I had put out there, one goal would be to try to do what we did last year and even better. And obviously we've had a lot of transitions inside City Hall and inside the police department, so I get that. But the resources are there. The community need is absolutely there, and the police department has some flexibility in terms of the recruitments, the classifications, and other items that could really bring that number down. So, yes.
Okay,
Chief
Chairman,
Hamilton.
if I could just comment
Yes.
on a couple of different areas. The first is the Background Investigations Unit. They've been working diligently, doing great work. One of the key pieces that I think is missing is a comprehensive look at how exactly we're recruiting from top to bottom. I've asked Deputy Chief Schnabel to look at that, and so we'll be studying that moving forward, because I think we need to look outside of the box in terms of how we're bringing people in. There are particular needs of this community. There's a particular type of police officer that we're looking for this community. And so that's something that we need to do in earnest beyond the traditional approach that we've had in place for quite some time. With regards to a shorter academy, we had a recent conversation, and what we were referring to was in addressing the park ranger need that has been there for quite some time, is looking at filling that classification with something other than through the threshold of a police officer, which requires a 6.5-month academy. You could have what would be an equivalent of a special officer classification, and there are training requirements there that cut that essentially in half. So that's something that we need to look at, something that we will look at, because again, that has been approached from a very traditional standpoint. If you're recruiting park rangers to the threshold of a police officer, why not be a police officer? And so that's what you hear from candidates. So we need to look at that differently. But I think a holistic approach from top to bottom on how we're doing it here for our city and what works best for our city, that's something we need to look at. The other piece, quite frankly, that I want to explore is the actual data that we can capture and analyze on our previous marketing strategy that we had, looking at what exactly did we get and what are we getting for that. Again, that's just going back and looking at the numbers and really looking at how we can best attract and retain officers here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for that clarification on the type of academies. Yeah, because no one really wants to lower standards. We just want to, compare all the options out there. So that is that item. Next, we're going to go to our homeless presentation. That's item number 3, and we do know we have one comment if he's still here, but we'll do the presentation first, and then we'll hear from our public commenter, which is Chris Schmidt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Villegas. It's a privilege to be here to follow behind the presentation provided by our colleagues in the police department in July. My presentation tonight has three parts. First is an overview of the issue of homelessness in in Orange County and specific data for Santa Ana. And then second is a discussion of the causes of that increase in homelessness from a housing perspective, an affordable housing perspective. And third, the solutions that we're implementing in our community development agency through the leadership and direction of our city council to reduce homelessness in Santa Ana. So starting with a general overview, one of the most important data points for any community to identify how many homeless individuals there are is through the point-in-time count. On January 27th, over 1,000 volunteers, including 3 members of our staff, went out and conducted a survey of the unsheltered and sheltered homeless individuals throughout Orange County, and found that there was 4,792 individuals counted on that night, on that point in time. Of that 4,792, 2,584 of those individuals were unsheltered and 2,208 were sheltered. What we saw was an increase in homelessness from 2015 to 2017 of 7.6%. This change, this increase, was not specific to Orange County. It was the same increase that Los Angeles, San Diego, County of Riverside, and San Bernardino, and Riverside also experienced. In fact, Los Angeles experienced a 34% increase in their homeless population from 2015 to 2017. San Diego saw a 4.3% increase, and Riverside a 1.4% increase. So we were not alone in experiencing an increase in homelessness in Orange County. The data for the homeless point-in-time count is important data to analyze. And one key point that I want to bring to the attention of the council members, particularly in regards to Prop 47 and discussions of the individuals released from jail, is that 28% of there were 2 new questions in the 2017 point-in-time count survey. One of those questions was, were you released from jail or prison in the last 12 months? 28% of the individuals, unsheltered adults, reported that they were released from jail. And then the second question, was a release from jail or prison a result of resentencing, a downgraded charge under Prop 47? And 8% of the unsheltered adults reported that that was the reason. So important data there. But relative to our overall population, even though we experienced a 7.6% increase in homelessness in Orange County, relative to our total population, it's actually only a 0.01% increase. So you see the total percent of our population that is homeless is only 0.15%. And relative to our similar sized county in San Diego has a population of 3.3 million individuals in San Diego County, and they have twice as many homeless individuals that they counted in their 2017 point-in-time count. For the data specific to Santa Ana, we have 2 sources of data. Today, our colleagues at the United 211 Orange County provided us with the metadata for Santa Ana, and Ms. City Manager Kurtz will be providing that data to you next Tuesday at our City Council meeting. But for even more specific data for Santa Ana relevant to our Civic Center, which we hear a lot of discussion in terms of the homeless individuals that reside in our Civic Center. In August 2016, we conducted a survey with the healthcare agency staff of the individuals here in our Civic Center and counted a total of 461 individuals residing in the Civic Center. Of the reasons for their homelessness, loss of job and no affordable housing options were two of the primary reasons that the individuals here in the Civic Center indicated that they were there. Now, following the declaration of the public health and safety crisis by our City Council in September 2016, the county then opened the Courtyard Transitional Center on October 6th. Following the opening of the courtyard, a large number of homeless individuals residing in the Civic Center was transitioned over to the courtyard. So you see in our Civic Center survey in August 2016, we counted 461. And then our colleagues at the healthcare agency subsequently conducted a survey in November 2016, January 2017, and April 2017. And in April 2017, counted 158 individuals here in our Civic Center. Now, it's important to note that most of those individuals transition to the courtyard, which on an average nightly basis has over 400 individuals who sleep at the courtyard transitional center. Now, let's transition that's baseline data. That's a good starting point for the issue of homelessness in our community. And again, not to reiterate the point, but data specific to Santa Ana will be presented at the City Council meeting next Tuesday. But transition into the causes of the increase in homelessness. Now, we take a perspective, an affordable, that the causes of the increase in homelessness is directly linked to a lack of affordable housing in our community and in Orange County.
Whose conclusions are these, by the way?
This data?
No, that these are the causes.
This is staff conclusions.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yep. So the first point that we want to make is that following the Sequestration Act in 2011, as well as the dissolution of redevelopment funding in 2012, led to a significant decrease in the amount of annual funding that we have available to provide affordable housing for our community. On an annual basis, we're working with $14 million less per year to provide affordable housing for our residents. Just as an example, a further example of that, in 2008, for our home program is one of our primary sources of affordable housing funds for the development of affordable housing. We're receiving $2.3 million from the federal government in 2008. And now for 2016, we received $1.1 million, so half of that amount. Again, in terms of the redevelopment agency funding for affordable housing, in 2008, we were receiving $15 million. And of course, now this year, we have received none of those funds to provide affordable housing for our community. The economics of affordable housing and the affordable housing crisis.
I'll just make a quick note because I know we as staff and as a city are going to continue to make a lot of comments on this. On the previous slide, I would just be a little bit careful in overemphasizing just these alone. And maybe we should put on some of the public safety things that we mentioned before. And I only just say that because, realistically, even when we did have more redevelopment and other dollars, we were only building so many new affordable units a year, and even of those, maybe a fraction were for folks that were homeless. So whether it be between these, the public safety items, you also have all the sober living homes in the particularly Costa Mesa area that, a lot of folks there are either failing or once they're done, they don't have where to go, and so they come here. So I think, number one, it's still a mystery, but I think there's a broader range, and I think this slide, because it's the only slide that has this header, I think highlights too much that it's just the lack of affordable housing being done, as well as if it's painted that way, it seems like it's the city that's not doing enough in terms of housing. And ironically, even though we've had some of these cuts, we probably have in the past couple of years have done more affordable housing than we did even in our golden years. So, because of the good work of you and others, Judson, I think we are doing quite a bit of affordable housing. And so this, if anything, is counter to what we're actually being able to build with the homeless items that we have. So just for the future. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to I'm going to go ahead and transition to the cost study on homelessness that was conducted by UCI. This cost study, the primary findings was one. The purpose of it was to identify the economic expenditures on homelessness by the municipalities, the county, the hospitals, our nonprofits, and the cost of homelessness to those entities, and assess the cost of those serving those living on the streets and in shelters versus those living in alternative housing solutions like the permanent supportive housing that Santa Ana is providing. And the key findings is that first is that the majority of Orange County's homeless are U.S. citizens and long-term Orange County residents of over 10 years. That addresses one of the misconceptions that many of the homeless are very transient and from outside of Orange County. The second key finding was that over nearly $300 million per year is spent to address homelessness in Orange County by governmental and non-governmental entities. Our city provided data for this survey, and overall, collectively, from the hospitals, from the other cities who participated in the survey, and the nonprofits, it was estimated that $299 million is spent to address this issue. And the next most important finding is that the costs of homelessness are driven upwards by our heaviest users, our highest frequency users of the hospital systems, of our EMS system, and the cost of, and most important to what we're doing here in Santa Ana is that the cost of homelessness declines when the homeless are housed. And you find that 10% of the chronically street homeless incur annual costs higher than $439,000, whereas the most costly of those in permanent supportive housing units incur annual costs in excess of only $55,000. The cost savings data on homelessness in general, on housing the homeless in general, and particularly the chronically street homeless, show that a consistent and compelling pattern that costs are markedly lower among the homeless who are housed, and this is especially true for the chronically homeless. It's an important point from the survey and from the study, and an important point for the leadership that our Santa Ana has undertaken to provide permanent supportive housing for our community. But in terms of our response to homelessness, transitioning to the efforts and initiatives that we've undertaken to address and reduce this issue for our community, we have a history of compassionate response to homelessness, not only in terms of our collaboration with other cities and with the county on this issue, but our HEART team, led by and administered by our police department, is a model program for cities throughout Southern California in terms of the police department's response to addressing and reducing homelessness. In addition, in September, our City Council approved the Civic Center Safety and Security Enhancement Program and adopted the resolution declaring a public health and safety crisis. And that led and influenced the opening of the Courtyard Transitional Center. Just this last June, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez convened a regional meeting with the county's 33 cities to discuss a regional solution to homelessness. Santa Ana is very proactive in identifying solutions and adopting solutions to address this issue. For fiscal year 17-18, our city budgeted over $1.3 million to reduce homelessness in Santa Ana. This includes $475,000.
Just to clarify, this isn't citywide. This is just within the department.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. City Manager. Yes, for our community development agency specific. So for our community development agency specifically, we allocated over $1.3 million to reduce homelessness in Santa Ana, and that in addition to that amount, we also awarded funds for the Santa Ana Veterans Village project of over $12 million and the Aqua Housing project of over $3.1 million a year. Those projects, I'll discuss those projects in a second. Our response to homelessness from our community development agency starts and begins with our reoccurring annual allocation of funds through the Emergency Solutions Grants Program. This is an annual allocation of over $475,000 to our agency to provide street outreach, emergency shelter, homeless prevention, rapid rehousing, and HMIS data collection. We've been administering this grant on the HUD's behalf as an entitlement jurisdiction for several years, and this is a reoccurring source of investment that we make on an annual basis to reduce homelessness in our community. And Ms. Terry Eggers, our Senior Community Development Analyst, is here tonight if you have any questions regarding our Emergency Solutions Grant Program. In addition, we've undertaken innovative solutions to address this issue and reduce homelessness in our community. First, beginning with this fiscal year, we began requiring that our ESG subrecipient nonprofit homeless service providers enter into an MOU with our work center to encourage the referral of program participants in need of employment, training, or career counseling. This was, so for example, when Mercy House or Illumination Foundation received and executed and contract with us to administer our Emergency Solutions grant funds, we required them that they enter into an MOU with our work center to refer families who are receiving services from their organizations, to refer them over to our work center so that those individuals can be provided with workforce training opportunities toward employment. In addition, for our housing authority is our largest provider of affordable housing in Santa Ana and the third largest provider of affordable housing in Orange County. Our City Council adopted a policy in 2015 that 50% of our annual turnover vouchers must be allocated to homeless individuals and families who are referred by approved referral agencies. This policy in practice means that when we pull families off of our waiting list, and we have several thousand families waiting on our waiting list, that at least 50% of those families who are pulling off the waiting list have to be individuals who are referred by by Mercy House and Illumination Foundation, who are approved referral agencies to our Section 8 program.
Various new housing elements, and I know many of them are new, so we may not even have guidelines yet, but do we give preference to homeless residents that are from Santa Ana?
Yes, okay. Absolutely, absolutely. We do not provide housing or any preference whatsoever to individuals who are not homeless in Santa Ana. That is a key requirement of our permanent supportive housing units, as well as our referrals from our approved referral agencies. In addition to those two solutions, we also participate in the regional efforts to address homelessness. We've been participating in the Association of California Cities of Orange County Regional Task Force since the formation of that task force back in early 2016. We also lead the Orange County Emergency Solutions Grants Collaborative. We are active participants in a Commission to End Homelessness, participating in all their meetings, including the Homeless Forum meetings and their commission board meetings. And we are also involved in a committee on ending veteran homelessness, for homeless veterans in Orange County. Lastly, over the last 2 years, we've implemented the Housing First model in Santa Ana to invest in the development of over 200 units of permanent supportive housing. We know that housing as a solution, permanent supportive housing as a solution works. It's proven to be cost effective. It's proven to be a sustainable long-term solution to reduce homelessness in states like Utah and cities like Houston. And we are now implementing this solution in Santa Ana. This is the location of our 3 permanent supportive housing projects. One of which is nearly complete, and the two other projects which have yet to begin construction. Starting with the Orchard, also known as the Guest House. This is a former motel that was converted into permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless individuals from the Civic Center. Utilizing a Housing First model, it provides 57 studios and 14 one-bedroom units that are fully furnished, with wraparound supportive services provided on-site by 4 case managers from Mercy House. The Mercy House staff do a very effective job to keep the individuals housed in the project so that they don't return to homelessness.
You know, I know that these items, we've heard presentations before at the council, so maybe we can, now that we've got the overview of what the projects are, I think that is it for your portion, and maybe our city manager wants to close us out with recommendations because I don't see them on the PowerPoint.
I think that was the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Jetson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our original plan was to bring each of the departments before you for a presentation like this. Mm-hmm. You saw Police Department, and Community Development Agency, and we have Public Works and Parks and the Fire Authority as well. But things are really accelerating, and what we had perceived as an orderly process by which then we would sit and discuss this is now feeling kind of cumbersome. While I'd like to still have Public Works and Parks and Fire come before the committee, I think in the meantime we need to take some immediate steps. Jetson showed you some of the numbers. We had got updated numbers today, and we will make those available. We have some recommendations that, if you concur, we would like to take forward to the City Council as early as the 19th of this month. The problem is clearly growing, no matter what numbers you look at, and that means whatever we're doing, we're not doing enough. It is concentrated in the Civic Center and along the river, but every day I suspect you are getting complaints about parks and streets and the downtown and business associations where they're feeling the problem now bubble into other aspects of our city other than the 2 concentrations. We're not alone. Other cities are experiencing this. Today I was talking to someone from Fullerton. 200 people showed up at a meeting about homelessness last week. Anaheim is having a city meeting tonight. And I think you've heard, and the chief can actually speak to the Orange County Supervisors meeting today, trying to look at how to grapple with this problem. And it really does take a balance. It's not a straight line. Do we look at immediate relief like shelters, or do we look at the long-term affordable housing? We wish to be humanitarian in our services, but are we enabling people to stay on the streets rather than helping them get off the streets? We have the rights of the people in the neighborhoods to be safe and feel that way in their homes, and then we also have the rights of the homeless to be in the public right-of-way. We talk about enforcement, but we talk about compassion, and we have to find the right line through all of those. It was interesting that an outcome of our lawsuit caused us as a city to pull a team together to actually meet with the city attorney so they would be well briefed on what it was that we had done, what the departments were doing. And what we found very quickly in that meeting is the departments were not coordinating. They are all doing their work very well. They have dedicated people that are working on homeless issues and non-homeless issues, but they didn't know what their other counterparts were doing. And in some cases, they were working against each other. So we've created a matrix team.
Unknowingly working against each other.
Unknowingly working against each other. I call it a matrix team. We have a team now that meets every 2 weeks. And it was really at the suggestion of the people in that room, we need to talk to each other. And so that's one good step, but it's not the only step. Police is actually rearranging their department to have a full-time homeless liaison that will be starting, I believe, the 18th of this month. But we get complaints from everywhere. We get complaints that come in through council, come in through my office, come in through each of the departments. They aren't going one place to be triaged, so that they're given a level of importance. Some of them we can deal with. They go out to departments. Some of them need to go to the county. Some of them need to probably go to resources in the nonprofit world. And we don't have, and then they all need to be followed up to make sure we did that. And we're not doing that. We're just all doing what we can when we get the complaint. The other cities I spoke to, the one thing that we have to be very careful, and we all say it, but I don't know we do it, is we're pushing a population around. Everybody feels like everybody else isn't doing enough unless we start talking and have ongoing forums like the ones that Santa Ana started. We may well be doing that, which doesn't solve the problem for the cities or for the homeless. And of course, the county plays an important role. I visited with the county last week. They were incredibly complimentary about Judson and Terry and the work we're doing with vouchers and supportive housing, but they had some other concerns about things we were doing, and they didn't know where to take them. So one of the things that we think, I touch on, we're not as organized, I believe, and I think because maybe we don't have a direct strategy ourselves with our nonprofit and faith-based. I'm really concerned about the Needle program and what it's doing in Civic Center. And yet I understand the public health aspects of that. But we need to have a strategy that says, if we're going to have a Needle program, where's it going to be? How do we want it run? And how do we make sure that it's not making the problem worse for the people that work here? Hopefully get the nonprofit organizations who provide incredibly valuable resources for this problem to work with us in implementing a strategy. We can feed people and we can make sure that they have clean needles, but where do we do it? How do we do it? And make sure that we're not impacting the rest of the city. So with that, I'm sorry, it's good I have notes. We also need to keep working with the state. The mayor's working with other mayors and looking at the affordable housing bond. There is a $4 billion bond that looks like it is going to move forward, but other legislative actions also are necessary. In talking to our fire chief, we were finding out that they need to take all 911 calls to the emergency ward, regardless of who they're picking up. That's the law. And all 911 calls, when it's a homeless person, need to go to the emergency ward. It is backing up their system. People aren't getting to the mental health or the shelter or the places where they need to be, and it is tying up the ambulances. And when Chief Black presents, he will be able to give you all the numbers on that. So we need a legislative strategy. So what I would like to ask is that if you would support the creation of a position, that'd be full-time. We have dollars for 2 years of funding that position in our citywide strategy. Help me, Jorge, where is the
fiscal year 14-15 surplus?
No, it's in the strategic plan. In strategic plan funding. There was $300,000 that was set aside for homeless programs, and we could use that for the position. Be our primary point of contact. Let all the people that are working on homeless programs continue to do their piece. Be our contact with the cities, with the county. Keep an inventory of services that are available from nonprofits, and reach out to those nonprofits to try and help them buy into a strategy that we are working towards getting people off the street, not keeping people on the street. We also, and just touch on this, another thing that I think is incredibly important and that you've talked about before is the mental health professionals that accompany the police. And the police are trying to expand that from 2 to 5 days a week. That's not yet happened. They're trying to work with the county. If we're not able to negotiate that, I think we should come back here and actually look at putting our own resources into hiring professional mental health experts to help the police. Again, that edge between enforcement and compassion and what the police officers can do when they're out there and having the proper assessment of what needs to be done is critical in making sure that we're getting people to where they need to be. It's just in the beginning. Creating a position doesn't solve our problem, but I think it will get us more organized, and I think it will get us better coordinated with other resources that are available at other levels of government and in the community. And then we will continue to report to you at each of your meetings and continue to have you review the programs that each of the departments are providing.
Very good. Thank you. Let's hear from our public speaker, and then we'll go to council members. Chris Schmidt.
I concur with everything City Manager Kurt said. I'm happy to hear somebody starting to talk some common sense in protecting the residents of Santa Ana. Thank you, Judson, for everything you've done for making housing available in our city. I'm glad to hear that we're creating this new position. I fully support it. In the last 10 months, I've had to contact the county healthcare agency at least 4 times. I literally can call Jason, and he will send out social workers. I've had to call about Bristol and Warner, Main and Warner, Main and Dyer, Segerstrom and Flower. There was literally a gentleman laying in the gutter at Bristol and Warner by Conroy's, digging out of the sewer while rush hour traffic was going right by his head. Mm-hmm. He literally had 2 people out there within a half hour. Earlier this year, I live right next to the riverbed. Felipe Guerrero, who's not here tonight, have both been fighting to get the riverbed cleared out. I noticed 1 tent behind a property in my house, in my neighborhood, that turned into 2 tents, that turned into 4 tents, that turned into literally a privacy wall around it, and I repeatedly asked to have it removed. On August 28th, I walked out my front door around 8 p.m. and I smelled something burning. I looked down the street and it looked like one of my neighbors' houses were on fire. So I ran down there thinking they needed help. It was the house where the encampment was directly behind. It was a trash and rubbish fire. Luckily, OCFA responded quickly and put it out. Their house wasn't damaged, but all the wires for charter cable had to be replaced, but I had literally been asking for 6 months to have it replaced. I have pictures here with the actual pulse point showing the actual trash, the fire, everything. Picture of it on April 3rd that I took, so I'm glad we're doing this. The point in time, if you look at our region, Central, says 1,362. I would estimate 75% of those people reside in the city of Santa Ana. I think our city has done a great job of trying to help address the homeless issue within our city. I think we've taken on the burden, and I think we need to help make other cities, the other 33 cities in Santa Ana, also step up to the plate and address it. So I'm in full support of this position we're creating tonight, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, I'm in supportive of the position. I'd also like for staff to find out if I really don't want to wait on the seeing where the mental health people we can hire in the future. If we can look into it now, it'd be great. I know the county is, so they're out right now, what, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 2 times a week?
Council member, they're out twice a week with our officers, and we have a verbal commitment that they will extend that to a full week, 5 days a week. We're just working on the logistics, and as of right now, it's still looking positive.
Okay, and then a couple of meetings ago, safety committees meetings ago, I was hoping we can get them 7 days a week because mental health doesn't take a day off. So people need
like gangs.
People need help, kind of like gangs.
Kind of like gangs. They don't take 3 days off.
And so if we can maybe hire, I don't know, some help for those 2 days that we don't have from the county. That way we have, because these folks need help, and it does no good that we give them help and then a few days later they're out. You know how the 5150 whole goes, and then they're back at square one and there's no follow-up. So we need some follow-up. And so in regarding the needle exchange program, so we how's that working? I mean, there's so many complaints about needles everywhere, and we're talking about maybe enabling people. So if we have these needles that we're providing for them, in a way, we're contributing to the problem. Is there any staff on that?
I think.
Jorge?
Sure. The city has had to take, the city and the county in the JPA area has had to take a reactionary measures in response to the needle exchange. Their current license allows them to operate through February of 2018. We are right now having conversations with Townsend Public Affairs to assist us with the renewal process of what that application is going to look like, since the Orange County Needle Exchange was the first in the state, and there is no established renewal process yet. So we're trying to figure out with the state what that process looks like, what the city's public comment and the community's public comment is going to be. But in the courtyard areas, the city and the county have actually had to purchase and service needle dispensary bins because there's just been an abundance of it. The students from UCI that operate the Orange County Needle Exchange do provide syringe containers. Unfortunately, they're not enough. They're quite small, and when someone can exchange up to 200 needles in a week, that becomes problematic because someone is not going to go around with 4 or 5 containers because it's just too much for them to carry, and they become a target, and it's not safe. So there's a reason why we're seeing these needles just being left around. We do get complaints about it. We do have the library here where we have had to provide additional training for our staff, gloves, other protective measures to ensure the safety of both the employees and the patrons that come into the Civic Center. But it is an issue. We are looking at ways to address it, both on the legislative side, but also on the public health side, because there is a need for it. But as the city manager alluded to earlier, it may not be in the right place. So that method and the location may not be working, which leads to other factors. But it's not unique to just Santa Ana.
My understanding is that for each needle, they can get 20 clean needles. So one needle, you get 20.
So for one dirty one, you could change for 20 clean ones.
That's my understanding.
And then
up to 200.
Up to 200
per week.
Per week.
Per week.
They don't have to return.
From me, personal experience working out here in the Civic Center, which is one of the main things that I talk about, is that I would always have to be careful where I step, and the officers also have to be careful where you step, because you're going to find needles all over the place. Not just that, but you have the public that comes here to go to do work, and it's just not acceptable, and it's just it's very upsetting. You know, another thing about the survey here, the Orange County Civic Center Homeless Survey from August 2016. These reasons for homelessness, some of them, you know, it's a little vague here. Loss of job was that because of drug use, or was it because of alcohol? Was it because of mental health? This other category here under other doesn't say why. So some of these things I question. There's a lot of people use heroin and meth, and that's what you find in the Civic Center: needles and pipes and lighters. That's the main thing. And trash. So, when I look at these numbers, I question it a little bit because I have some firsthand knowledge. I talked to these folks for the last 20 years. I've seen this Civic Center change. And, one thing is what they tell the people that are doing the surveys, and another thing is what you see them do every day. And when people are not looking, the public's not around. I just see how they live. So this thing is, I question it. But other than that, I would like to see if maybe we can at least look at some numbers regarding the getting back to the mental health. If we can see about hiring some folks for 2 days that the county is not here, so we can address that issue 7 days a week and continue with the cleaning, because that's another problem we have, and is the cleanliness out there. How is that coming along? The trash pickup and all that, because
do you want to speak to that too? I didn't.
Yes.
We just recently did a steam clean.
Correct. We did just increase the frequency for pressure washing at the next city council meeting. Before you will be an amendment to one of our existing agreements that actually may be October 3rd. I may be getting a little ahead of myself. That may be October, to increase the trash cleanup frequency as well as additional pressure washing in the Plaza of the Flags area, which is where we have a large concentration of those folks that don't use the courtyard services, at least not as a shelter.
Very good. Thank you. That's all the questions I have at the moment.
Thank you, Councilmember Villegas. Did you want to comment on something?
Yeah, Chairman. I just wanted to comment and elaborate a little further. The city manager had mentioned that there was an item today at the Board of Supervisors, and it's something that we very much need to be aware of here locally. There is a strategic task force that has been put together, led by the Sheriff's Department, to address the population along the riverbed. And so the approach is going to be to offer services initially, and if those are declined by the folks that are there, then there will be a move for any type of enforcement. I did reach out to the Sheriff's Department and speak to them regarding the concern that I have for our community, and that the displacement that may occur of all those folks there that will either potentially come to the Civic Center, courtyard, or just spill into the neighborhoods. And so it's a concern. I shared it with the Sheriff's Department. They have county health attached to this group. They have a district attorney attached for any prosecution that may occur. They have commitments from police chiefs in cities of Anaheim, Orange, and Fountain Valley. And so we talked about looking at what the strategy is going to be. They intend to establish MOUs with the various contiguous cities. And so I look forward to reviewing that along with the city attorney's office and provide further information, because I think it's to simply address it from an enforcement standpoint is obviously problematic. And the piece on housing is really the key to breaking that cycle of homelessness and addressing it. Now, there are also, crimes that are occurring, felony crimes that are occurring along the riverbed and associated. So, obviously, that's an approach that will be taken, but it's something that we need to be aware of and keep an eye on as we move forward. I will assign a resource to really observe and report back as to how that unfolds. Their intent, is my understanding, to move forward with their strategy as soon as this Thursday. To go out and make contact with folks that are out there and then follow up with enforcement. And so I just wanted to share that and then also commit that we'll continue to monitor that engagement and what it looks like and how we play a factor.
Thank you, Chief. Just a few comments first. I do want to thank our city manager for moving us in this direction. We definitely need a point person, and I think between that point person and these kind of umbrella goals is the start of having a citywide plan to deal with this crisis. Really, prior plans have been largely focused on the Civic Center. Having said that, I too am very concerned about the activity on the river and these new actions by the sheriff, because I think a disproportionate number of folks may end up in our city. And so we got to be very careful and defensive in what happens there. Also, something that's been brought to my attention, and maybe through our mayor or I'll figure out how we can have a stronger role on this earlier than later. The county has about 100 acres at the Great Park. that's meant for institutional purposes, and the federal government, offered it to them for institutional purposes. And it is in Irvine near the freeway. I toured it recently. Massive piece of property along the freeway, and so it kind of makes sense that they do dedicate, some of that to a homeless shelter. And up to recent times, their two primary alternatives had a shelter. One approximately 300 beds, another one close to 700 beds. But as of more recent, they've become fascinated with this idea, instead of just putting residential homes there, and generating $4 billion in dollars over the next 75 years is what they tabulated at, and so really at the expense of not putting institutional uses there. And I think we need to hold the county accountable and make sure that they put that land towards institutional uses, including a shelter. So I want us all to advocate on that. And again, that may be more of a media or political thing, which I mentioned the mayor, and I know others are talking to folks in other cities or the county. So I want to highlight that as something that we, both on the political, but I think on the staffing side, need to figure out how to hold the county accountable for that. Also, some may be aware there's a developmental center in Costa Mesa called Fairview that the state is in the process of shutting down because they're going to smaller facilities. And Senator John Morlock would like to see a mental health facility there. And Costa Mesa isn't exactly saying no, but they don't want it too big, and they too want some of that land for housing, not just for institutional uses. So that I think is something we need to support. And then as we continue to have to provide more for policing, for garbage cleanup, everything else, we need to ask the county to chip in and give us some dough or give us dedicated staff to help with all these things. Really, all these things are just putting more responsibility on us. Again, I think this is a good overview and umbrella. I, based off my research and talking to a number of folks, have a list of about 25 more kind of tactical items of the kinds of things we need to do. So as some just examples, like on the needles, maybe we ought to take the path that, we don't mind doing a little bit of needle exchange if other cities do as well. And so that as we have providers, whether they're the county or others, that we say, hey, we're willing to do it, but you got to have 2 or 3 other sites, including, let's say, in north and south, so that's not just us being the magnet for it. Likewise, with something that's less known, but a comparable thing, it's the antidote, if you will, for overdoses of opioid, and it's this Narcan. And there's another more formal name to it, but Narcan item that we give out also for free in our downtown. And so if you want to, be safe and be protected from an overdose, why not come to Santa Ana where you get free Narcan? And so that's another reason to come down. And again, maybe with that too, we ought to say, hey, we don't mind letting providers make that available, but only if they do it in other cities. Councilmember Villegas too had a good point about, distance requirements between where the homeless are and publicly used areas that are heavily used, whether it be the library, the courts, or whatever, that we need to say, hey, you got to be minimum, 200 feet away or whatever it might be. And then we got to enforce that. We just say, hey, you just can't be here. You got to be a little bit farther out, because we do have a lot of tourists or jury folks or kids wanting to go to the library, and when there's too much activity too close by, that creates a problem. And then there are other things like 5150 cases where those folks that are detained for that, they end up going to a limited number of facilities for their up to, I think, 72-hour stay, and most of those places are in Santa Ana. And so there are, I think, a couple others outside of the area, but we ought to say, hey, we need cities and sheriffs, as we get these 51 cases, move them around, because it's my understanding that at the end of the 72 hours, either they could be picked up or they just walk or they just leave on their own. And so if they're all being housed and detained here, obviously we're going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. So again, those are just some examples, some more tactical things I think that we can do, because really this is a shared responsibility, and will need to step up and be a little bit more aggressive. I know in terms of the number of calls for service, and maybe our city manager, police chief can give Councilmember Villegas and I an updated email showing the numbers of calls for service that are homeless related year to date, because I think it's in the thousands, and I would like to have an updated.
You might want that
figure on
from fire as well, because we're paying for that as well as on our contract, and you'll
Very
be
good.
amazed at the number of calls.
Very good.
Specific.
But
to
they
the
all come
homeless.
into 911, so wasn't it the same tabulation, or you think you have different records, or what?
No, they all come in through PD as a
Right.
primary receiving
Uh-huh.
of the phone call.
Uh-huh.
But then if it's a medical call, that gets transferred over to
Okay.
us.
Yeah, so maybe if you have a breakdown of those homeless calls where you interact, maybe that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
stats right now as to year to date. Right now in the city of Santa Ana, we've run 2,215 calls on people who say that they are homeless. We have about 1,000 more that are probably homeless calls, but they don't claim themselves.
But they
to be
reach you
homeless.
because these 2,200 people, you can take them to the emergency room, or why would they?
Well, they're having a
end up
medical
on-
emergency. Many of them
Oh,
are
they're having a
truly,
medical emergency.
Many of them are
Okay.
truly medically fragile people.
No, for sure.
They're on the streets and they don't have access to other medical places. And as the city manager pointed out, if they want our services, we only have an option to take them to an emergency room. I cannot take them to a mental health facility right now. Currently, legislatively, I have to take them to an ER, which then backs up the ERs.
And
which
so, what
then
are your
backs
options?
up-
Where are these ER places?
Emergency rooms. So Global, OC Global, UCI, Coastal Community Hospital, all of the designated emergency rooms that are paramedic receiving centers. And we're surrounded, St. Joseph's, UCI, OC Global, Coastal Community, Fountain Valley Regional. are-
So, do you
are
know
all
for other
paramedic receiving.
cities? So, if it's a call in Tustin, where do they get taken to?
Oftentimes, Tustin would go to OC Global or Irvine, Kaiser Irvine.
Okay.
Yeah. Any 911 call that comes in and people want the emergency medical services, they have to go to an emergency room that is designated as a paramedic receiving center.
Very good. So a lot of work ahead of us, but we all got to step up and do our part. So thank you all for that. What's that? Our next meeting, we know we have a regularly scheduled one, but I believe we're considering having a special meeting in October to discuss implementation of future marijuana policy items, given that a recent state proposition asks that we consider other things. So I think we're looking at an October 2nd
Yeah.
meeting, largely dedicated just to that item. And
If we can do that, that puts us on track to making sure that we are able to implement whatever the council decides
Right.
chooses to do before January 1.
Correct, so we can be
Otherwise, we
prepared.
lose control.
correct, yes.
Are the council members going to follow the recommended action on item number 3?
Oh, yeah, let's go back to the recommended actions. I'm supportive. I'm willing to make the motion. Again, I see this more as an umbrella of what we ought to do in the beginning of a
second that.
citywide plan. And I think it's my understanding this is going to come to our council meeting.
We're going to make the 19th?
The
We're gonna
19th?
make yeah, we will be there the 19th.
Which be good. And then again, I'll just, again, I don't know when maybe through these, under this umbrella and through our point person, I'll share this other list of ideas and what makes sense for y'all, fine. Because, some of them are a little bit aggressive, but I think they're smart and they're tactical, and hopefully we can do some of them. Very good. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that set of recommendation does pass. Thank you again for all the great work on that. Next, we have council member comments and future items. Let's do that together. Councilmember Villegas.
I just want to say thank you to the public for coming out, and to all the staff for all the hard work. Chief Black, Chief Valentine, thank you very much. City Manager, thank you for all the hard work, great ideas. I think we got a lot done. Thank you very much.
Thank you and have a good evening.